They were too old, too slow, too far past their prime. That was the verdict on the 1969 Boston Celtics. They finished fourth. Bill Russell was 35, coaching and playing at the same time. Sam Jones had lost his starting job. The dynasty looked finished and the league had moved on. Waiting at the end was the most loaded roster in basketball. Wilt Chamberlain, Jerry West, Elgin Baylor, and the Lakers. And the Celtics beat them anyway. This is the story of Boston's last stand, the most unlikely championship of their dynasty, a shocking Game 7 in Los Angeles, the infamous balloons in the rafters, and the finals where a player on the losing team somehow walked away with MVP. But to understand why 1969 mattered so much, you have to understand what was ending. Because this wasn't just a championship. This was a funeral and a coronation happening at the same time. Let's start with the dynasty itself. For most of the 1960s, the NBA was not a competition. It was a formality. The Boston Celtics won, and everyone else played for second. From 1959 through 1966, they won 8 consecutive titles. 8. That is not a record that has ever been seriously threatened, and it likely never will be. At the center of it, literally and figuratively, was Bill Russell. Not a scorer, not a flashy highlight machine, a defender, a rebounder. A man whose entire genius was built around making everyone around him better and making every opponent worse. He didn't fill up the box score. He filled up the trophy case. Around Russell stood a rotating cast of legends. Bob Cousy in the early years, Tom Heinsohn, K.C. Jones, Sam Jones. And running the whole machine from the sideline was Red Auerbach, the cigar-chomping mastermind who built the Celtics into something close to a religion in Boston. Auerbach didn't just coach, he outworked and outsmarted every front office in the league. And when he finally stepped down from coaching after the 1966 season to run the team from the front office, he made a decision that would have seemed insane anywhere else. He handed the team to a player. Auerbach named Bill Russell his replacement as head coach. Russell would keep playing, he would also coach. Player and coach at the same time, in a league full of grown men and massive egos and brutal travel and impossible expectations. When people asked Auerbach why he would do something so risky, his answer was simple. He said nobody could motivate Bill Russell better than Bill Russell himself. And there was something else about that decision that mattered far beyond basketball. When Russell took that job in 1966, he became the first African-American head coach in the history of major American professional team sports. Not just in basketball, in any of the big leagues. At a time when the country was tearing itself apart over civil rights, when Russell himself had faced ugly racism in the very city he played for. He was handed the keys to the most successful franchise in the sport. And he didn't just hold the seat, he won with it. In his first season as player-coach, the Celtics fell short. The Philadelphia 76ers, led by Wilt Chamberlain, finally broke through and ended Boston's title streak in 1967. The dynasty looked dead. But the Celtics answered the next year, storming back from a 3-1 deficit against those same 76ers and winning it all in 1968. It was supposed to be the perfect ending. The dynasty reasserting itself one last time. Except it wasn't the ending. There was one more season left. And that season, 1968 into 1969, would test everything the Celtics were made of. Because the cracks were no longer hairline fractures, they were canyons. Bill Russell was 35 years old and exhausted. The weight of playing and coaching had been grinding him down for 3 years, and it showed. His scoring had dropped to under 10 points a game. He needed rest he couldn't take, because the team needed him on the floor for almost every meaningful minute. He was running on memory and willpower. Sam Jones, one of the deadliest shooters the league had ever seen, was 35 too, and slumping so badly that he lost his starting position. The man who had hit clutch shot after clutch shot for a decade couldn't find the bottom of the net, and a younger guard named Larry Siegfried took his spot in the lineup. For a player of Sam Jones's pride, that was a quiet humiliation. The team as a whole was old. The average age of the roster was up around 31, which in that era was ancient for professional basketball. The bodies were breaking down, and the rest of the league had caught up and in some cases passed them by. When the regular season ended, the numbers told a brutal story. 48 wins and 34 losses. The worst record of the entire Russell era. They finished 4th in the Eastern Division, 4th behind the Baltimore Bullets, who had won 57 games, behind the Philadelphia 76ers, who had won 55, behind the New York Knicks, who had won 54. The mighty Celtics, the team that had owned the decade, backed into the playoffs as an afterthought. No fourth-place team had ever reached the finals, not once in the history of the league. The path in front of Boston wasn't a path, it was a wall. But here is what the standings could not measure. Here is the thing the obituary writers missed. This team could still defend like nothing else on earth. For all their age, for all their offensive struggles, the 1969 Celtics had the single best defense in the entire NBA. Russell anchored the back line like he always had, swatting shots and altering everything, turning the lane into a no-fly zone. They couldn't always score, but they could always stop you. And in the playoffs, where every possession tightens and every game slows to a grind, defense doesn't get tired the way offense does. Defense travels. Defense wins in May. The Celtics knew something the rest of the league had forgotten. Regular seasons are for everyone. The playoffs belong to them, and they were about to prove it one more time. The first obstacle was the Philadelphia 76ers, the second best team in the conference, the team that had ended Boston's streak 2 years earlier. On paper, Philadelphia should have rolled. More talent, a better record, fresher legs. But the playoffs flipped the script. Boston's veterans knew exactly how to win this kind of series. They knew how to control tempo, how to defend without fouling, how to take a young team out of its rhythm and make it doubt itself. The Celtics dismantled the 76ers, taking the series in 5 games. The team that finished 7 games worse in the standings simply executed Philadelphia into submission. One wall down, the next one was worse. The Eastern Division Finals brought the New York Knicks, and the Knicks were the future. Everybody could feel it. They were young, they were athletic, loaded with talent. Willis Reed in the middle, Walt Frazier running the show with that cool surgical control. There was a sense across the league that this series was the changing of the guard. The old kings against the young princes. The Knicks had earned it too, having upset the top-seeded Baltimore Bullets to clear a little of the path in front of Boston. The Celtics had other ideas. It was a tight, physical, brutal series with the home team winning game after game. But Boston had the one thing New York didn't have yet. They had been here. They had stood in this exact spot, with everything on the line, more times than they could count. And when the pressure cranked up to its highest setting, the old Celtics didn't blink. They closed out the Knicks in 6 games. The crown stayed in Boston a little longer, and so a team that finished 4th, a team that nobody believed in, a team built around 2 35-year-olds, and a defense that refused to age, punched its ticket to the NBA Finals. The first 4th-place team ever to do it. But if you thought the Knicks were a tough draw, what was waiting in the finals was something else entirely. Something that looked, on paper, completely unbeatable. Because waiting in Los Angeles were the Lakers, and the Lakers had built a monster. Let's talk about what the Lakers had done. Before the season, they went out and acquired Wilt Chamberlain. Wilt, the most physically dominant force the sport had ever seen. The man who once scored 100 points in a single game. And they didn't just have Wilt. They already had Jerry West, one of the greatest guards in history, a scoring machine so clutch he would eventually become the silhouette in the league's own logo. And they had Elgin Baylor, a high-flying forward who had been an all-NBA fixture for a decade, a player who changed what was physically possible on a basketball court. 3 legends on one team. It was the closest thing the 1960s had to a super team, and the entire basketball world looked at that roster and assumed the title was a formality. But there was a crack in the monster too, and it was a big one. That much talent didn't mesh easily. The season had been described as a soap opera. Chamberlain, West, and Baylor had spent years building their games around being the man, and now there were 3 of them trying to share one ball. The fit was awkward. The chemistry was forced. And worst of all, Chamberlain and the Lakers head coach, Butch Van Breda-Colt, did not get along. At all. They clashed constantly throughout the season, 2 stubborn men in a power struggle that poisoned the whole operation. That tension never went away. It just sat there, simmering, waiting for the worst possible moment to explode. There was also history, heavy, suffocating history. The Lakers and the Celtics had met in the finals 6 times before, and 6 times the Celtics had won. Every single time, Los Angeles had built rosters, made trades, changed coaches, and every time they ran into Boston with a championship on the line, they lost. Beating the Celtics in the finals wasn't just a goal, it was an exorcism. This time, though, the Lakers had something they had never had before against a Russell-led Celtics team: home court advantage. They had won 55 games to Boston's 48, so the deciding game, if it came to that, would be played in Los Angeles. For the first time ever, the Celtics would have to win it on enemy ground. The stage was set, the aging champions against the loaded challengers, the dynasty in its final breath against the super team built to end it. And it started exactly how everyone feared for Boston. Game 1 in Los Angeles, Bill Russell made a decision that would be second-guessed immediately. He told his players not to double-team Jerry West, trusting his guards to handle the superstar one-on-one. It was a gamble, and it backfired spectacularly. West, freed from the extra attention, went off for 53 points. 53, he carved up Sam Jones and Larry Siegfried like they weren't even there. The lead changed 21 times in a wild back-and-forth war, and in the end it was Chamberlain himself who sealed it with a clutch basket in the final seconds. Lakers win. 1-0. Game 2, same building, same problem. Russell stuck with his plan and again refused to double West. And again West punished him, this time for 41 points. Baylor chipped in 31, including the last 12 Laker points of the game. A reserve guard named Johnny Egan added 26. The Lakers had too many weapons, and Boston couldn't stop the bleeding. Los Angeles won again. 2-0. The series shifted to Boston with the Celtics down 0 games to 2, and here is a fact that tells you how dire that was. No team in the history of the NBA Finals had ever come back from a 2-game deficit to win the championship. Nobody. The obituaries that had been written all season were getting dusted off again. The dynasty was finally truly dead. Except the Celtics went home. And going home changed everything. In Game 3, Russell finally abandoned his stubborn plan and ordered his team to double-team Jerry West. And immediately, the whole series tilted. With the extra defender flying at him, West lost his shooting touch. He had been quietly battling exhaustion all series, and now under the heightened pressure, he had to come out for longer rests. Every time he sat, the Lakers fell apart without him. The hero of Game 3 was John Havlicek, playing through a swollen, half-shut eye after taking a finger to the face, gutting out 34 points to drag Boston back into the series. Celtics win, 2-1. Then came Game 4. And Game 4 is where this series became legend. It was an ugly game, a genuinely bad basketball game, 50 turnovers between the two teams, bricks clanging off the rim all night. But it was the turning point of the entire finals, and it came down to one of the most famous shots in Celtics history. With 7 seconds left, the Lakers led by a single point and had the ball. All they had to do was inbound it cleanly and run out the clock. But on the inbound, along the sideline, Elgin Baylor was ruled to have stepped out of bounds. A controversial call, the kind that haunts a franchise for decades. And just like that, the ball went back to Boston with a chance to win. What the Celtics ran next had a nickname. They called it the Ohio play because 3 of the men involved had all played at Ohio State. Havlicek, Siegfried, and Bailey Howell set up a triple screen, 3 bodies stacked to free 1 shooter. And the shooter was Sam Jones, the same Sam Jones who had slumped all year, who had lost his starting job, who at 35 was supposed to be finished. He came off that wall of screens and rose up, and he jumped off the wrong foot. His balance was gone, the mechanics were a mess, it should have been a brick. The ball floated up, somehow slipped past Chamberlain's outstretched hand, hit the front of the rim, bounced up onto the back of the rim, hung there for an eternity, and dropped through as the buzzer sounded. Sam Jones, off the wrong foot with the series on the line, banked home a miracle. Instead of going down 3 games to 1 and facing certain elimination, the Celtics had tied it at 2 games apiece. The building in Boston came apart, and for the first time, the Lakers had to feel the old ghost again. The ghost of every finals they had ever lost to this team. The series was a war now, even at 2 games each, and it got even more brutal in Game 5 back in Los Angeles. Enraged by the gut-punch loss in Game 4, the Lakers came out firing and overran Boston with a relentless attack, pushing toward a comfortable lead. But the game gave us a moment that would define the rest of the series, and it was a quiet one. With about 3 minutes left and the Lakers safely ahead, Boston's M. Bryant stole the ball from Jerry West. West, instead of conceding the play, lunged desperately to get it back. And in that lunge, he pulled his hamstring. He had to be helped from the floor. The injury was serious, and everyone knew instantly it would not heal before the series was over. The greatest scorer in the series, the man who had been carving Boston up since Game 1, was now playing on one good leg. The Lakers won Game 5 to go up 3 games to 2. But the cost was enormous, and it would come due very soon. Game 6 was back in Boston, with the Celtics facing elimination, and the old champions responded with one of their most complete defensive performances of the entire run. They jumped out to a commanding halftime lead, 55-39, and never looked back. At one stretch, their own shooting went ice cold. And it didn't matter. The Lakers were so listless, they couldn't capitalize. West was limping, Baylor couldn't carry it alone, and Chamberlain, hounded all night by Russell, managed only 8 points. 8. For the most dominant scorer the sport had ever produced, it was a stunning collapse, and the whispers started immediately. People began saying Wilt had choked when it mattered most. Boston won going away. The series was tied at 3 games each, and now it all came down to 1 game. Game 7. In Los Angeles, on the Lakers' home floor, everything the 1969 Celtics were, everything the dynasty had ever been, came down to 48 minutes in enemy territory. And before that game even started, the Lakers made a mistake that would be remembered forever. Lakers owner Jack Kent Cooke was so confident of victory that he prepared a celebration in advance. He had thousands of balloons, each one printed with the words "World Champion Lakers" hoisted up into a giant net in the rafters of the Forum, ready to be released the moment the clock hit 0. Flyers were placed on every single seat in the arena, laying out the entire celebration plan, declaring that when, not if, the Lakers won the title, the balloons would fall, the USC marching band would strike up "Happy Days Are Here Again," and the broadcaster would interview Baylor, West, and Chamberlain in that exact order. When, not if. The word choice alone was a dagger of arrogance. Somehow, a copy of that plan made its way into the Boston locker room before the game. The Celtics read it. They passed it around, and nothing in the world could have lit a fire under a proud, aging, disrespected team quite like being told in writing that their funeral arrangements had already been made. Jerry West himself, when he came out for his pre-game warm-up and saw those balloons hanging there, was furious. He understood instantly what a catastrophe it would be if the Lakers lost. And then there was Bill Russell. Russell looked up at that net, at the thousands of balloons waiting to crown someone else, and he turned to Jerry West and told him flatly that those balloons were staying right where they were. They were not coming down. Not tonight. It was the kind of line that only means anything if you back it up. Russell was about to back it up. Russell built his game plan around the one fatal flaw the Lakers couldn't hide. They had only two true guards, and one of them, Jerry West, was playing on a torn-up hamstring. So Russell told his team to run. Fast break at every opportunity. Push the pace, exhaust the wounded leg, make the Lakers' defense scramble and break down. It worked from the opening tip. Boston came out flying and jumped to a first-quarter lead, 24-12, as Los Angeles shot miserably to start. The Lakers fought back enough to make it close at the half, 59-56, but then the third quarter belonged to the most unlikely hero. Don Nelson, the Celtics' sixth man, caught fire and scored 12 points in the quarter. Boston pulled away to a commanding 91-76 after 3. 15 points up, one quarter from the end of everything. But this was the Lakers, at home, with West and Chamberlain. A 15-point lead was nowhere near safe. And what happened in that fourth quarter is the part of this story nobody who saw it ever forgot. Early in the fourth, disaster struck the Lakers. Wilt Chamberlain picked up his fifth foul. And you have to understand something about Wilt to feel the weight of this. In his entire career, across thousands of minutes, he had never once fouled out of a game. Not ever. It was a point of pride, an almost superhuman streak. So now, sitting on 5 fouls in the biggest game of his life, he had to play tentatively, afraid to commit the one that would end his night. Boston smelled blood. The Celtics chipped and clawed and held their lead. And then, with just over 5 minutes to play and Los Angeles down 9, 94-103, the moment came that cracked this game wide open. Chamberlain went up for a rebound, came down awkwardly and injured his knee. He limped to the bench. The most dominant physical force in basketball history, removed from Game 7 of the finals with his team down 9 and the clock running out. And then something extraordinary happened. With Wilt out and backup center Mel Counts on the floor, the Lakers actually played better. Counts hit shots, the offense opened up, and Los Angeles went on a run. They cut the lead all the way down to a single point. 103-102. The Forum was shaking, the balloons trembled in the net. The comeback was on. And it was right then that Wilt Chamberlain told his coach he was ready to go back in. This was the moment. The superstar knee-taped, telling Butch Van Breda Kolff to put him back on the floor so he could finish the job and win the championship that had eluded the Lakers forever. And Van Breda Kolff said no. The coach who had feuded with Chamberlain all season long looked at his injured superstar and told him the team was doing fine without him. In Game 7 of the NBA Finals, with the title within reach, the head coach of the Los Angeles Lakers refused to put Wilt Chamberlain back on the floor because of a personal grudge and a moment of stubborn pride. It remains one of the most stunning coaching decisions ever made. And it cracked the door just wide enough for Boston to slam it shut. The Celtics still clung to a 1-point lead, 103-102, with about a minute and a half remaining. The ball was in John Havlicek's hands, and then Keith Erickson of the Lakers reached in and knocked it loose. The ball squirted free, bouncing across the floor, up for grabs in the most important seconds of the season. It bounced right to Don Nelson. Nelson, the sixth man who had already given Boston 12 points in the third quarter, found himself with the ball near the free throw line and the shot clock about to expire. He had no choice. He had to put it up. So he launched an 18-foot jumper under maximum pressure, a desperation shot just to beat the clock. The ball came down and hit the back of the rim. And instead of bouncing away, it kicked straight up into the air, high above the basket, hung there for one impossible heartbeat, and dropped straight down through the net. 105 to 102. Of all the lucky bounces and miracle finishes in this series, that was the one that broke the Lakers for good. A back rim bounce, straight up, straight down, dagger. The same cruel basketball fate that had taken Sam Jones's wrong-footed prayer in Game 4 now came for Los Angeles one final time. The Lakers, rattled and reeling, coughed up costly turnovers in the closing moments. The clock wound down with Wilt Chamberlain still sitting on the bench, watching, helpless, as the championship he came to Los Angeles to win slipped away in front of him. A meaningless basket at the very end made the final score 108 to 106. The Boston Celtics had done it. They had won Game 7 on the road, the first time in finals history a deciding seventh game had ever been won by the visiting team. They had become the first team ever to climb out of a 2-games-to-none hole to win the title. A fourth-place team, written off all year, had walked into the Lions' den and stolen the crown. And those balloons that Bill Russell promised would stay in the rafters. They stayed in the rafters. They never fell. The net hung there over the heads of the defeated Lakers, a monument to arrogance, never released, while the visitors celebrated on their floor. There may be no more perfect image in the history of the sport. The trophy printed before the game was won. The celebration planned for a victory that never came. At 35 years old, in the final game he would ever play, Bill Russell finished with 6 points, 21 rebounds, and 6 assists. Not gaudy numbers, Russell numbers. The numbers of a man who had spent 13 years caring only about the one stat that mattered, which was the final one in the win column. 11 championships in 13 seasons. There is no comparison to it anywhere in the sport, and there almost certainly never will be. But the most human moment of the night didn't belong to a Celtic. Jerry West had been magnificent and heartbroken in the same series. He scored 42 points in that Game 7, on a leg that was barely holding together. Across the 7 games, he averaged nearly 38 points a night against the best defense in basketball. And when it was over, when his team had lost in the finals yet again, the league did something it had never done before and has never done since. They named Jerry West the most valuable player of the finals. It was the very first year the award existed. And to this day, West remains the only player in NBA history to win Finals MVP while playing for the losing team. He didn't even want it. He had been the best player on the floor, and it still wasn't enough. After the final buzzer, Russell sought out West, who was devastated. The two rivals had spent years trying to destroy each other on the court, but Russell went to him, clasped his hand, and tried to console the man he had just beaten. It was the kind of respect that only exists between two warriors who understand exactly what the other one just went through. And then Bill Russell walked off the floor and out of basketball. His retirement was so abrupt, so quiet, that it blindsided everyone, including Red Auerbach himself. Russell didn't make a grand farewell tour. He didn't soak up ovations in every arena. He simply decided he was done, and he was done. When the Celtics held a celebration days later and 30,000 fans came out to cheer their returning champions, Russell wasn't there. He had already cut ties and moved on. Some in Boston felt betrayed, but that was Russell. He played for his teammates and for winning, and once the winning was finished, so was he. The fallout was immediate and brutal. Auerbach had been so certain Russell would play one more year that the team had no replacement at center. They drafted a guard, Joe White, but there was no one to anchor the middle the way Russell had. The next season, without him, the Celtics collapsed to 34 wins and 48 losses and missed the playoffs entirely for the first time in 20 years. That is the most damning proof of what Russell meant. The moment he left, the dynasty didn't decline. It vanished. So what do we make of the 1969 Boston Celtics all these years later? They were not the most talented team Boston ever fielded, not even close to the best Celtics team of the decade by the numbers. They were old, they were slow, they were outgunned, and they finished fourth. By every measure a regular season uses to sort the great from the ordinary, they looked ordinary. And yet they are remembered as one of the most special champions in the history of the sport. Because the 1969 Celtics proved that experience, defense, will, and a refusal to die can beat raw ability when it matters most. They proved that a regular season and a championship are two completely different tests, and that some teams are built only for the second one. They were not built to dominate every night anymore. They were built to survive the nights that mattered. They beat a super team, a roster with three of the greatest players who ever lived, with home court and destiny seemingly arranged in advance. Wilt Chamberlain, Jerry West, and Elgin Baylor were supposed to finally take the crown. The Lakers had the stars, the building, the crowd, and even the balloons waiting in the rafters. But Boston had the nerve. They did it with an aging center who couldn't score like he used to, a shooter who had lost his job, John Havlicek carrying everything he could, and a sixth man named Don Nelson, whose strange bouncing shot became one of the most unforgettable moments in finals history. They turned the Lakers' own arrogance into fuel. Every doubt, every insult, every prediction that their time was over only made the ending sweeter. There is a reason this team holds such a sacred place in NBA history. It was the perfect ending to the most dominant run any franchise has ever had. The dynasty didn't fade out quietly over years of slow decline. It went out on top in a Game 7 on the road against impossible odds, with its greatest player walking straight off the court and into retirement on the same night. No Hollywood writer would have dared make it that dramatic. The 1969 Boston Celtics were the team nobody believed in, who refused to believe the doubters, and who made the entire basketball world eat its words one final time. They were the last stand of a dynasty that may never be matched, and they left behind one perfect image: a net full of balloons hanging high in the rafters of the Forum, waiting for a celebration that never came. The balloons never fell, the Lakers never got their coronation, and the old, slow fourth-place Celtics walked out as champions one last time. If you enjoyed this breakdown of one of the greatest underdog championships in NBA history, do me a favor and hit that like button, and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the moments and teams that shaped the game. Until next time.